From Wakefield, it's the Nolan Current Night Show, inviting you to join Nolan and his guest this week, Jonathan Sanford, to the show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Nolan.
Eventually, you tag back into the game a few years later with the Rockets, but they were near the end of Kevin McHale's run as a head coach, of course, pandemic and that sort of stuff, 2020 season. And then the cracks were starting to form a little bit with James Harden in the organization and some of the other players, Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook. With it going from a team like San Antonio and the culture that they provide to not just the team, but to the community of San Antonio, similar to Alabama, what was it like going to totally opposite type of team with Houston? Were you nervous about it, or were you somebody who was ready to jump into that uncomfortable situation again?
I looked at it as a cool challenge. I mean, for me, it just seemed so unrealistic that I would ever get another opportunity.
Sure.
When you give up that seat with an NBA team, the chances of you being in that seat for another NBA team are slim to none,
Yeah.
and usually Slim leaves town a long time before. Um, so for me, the day that I was hired and I looked at the situation and I knew, what the previous season had been like for the Rockets, and it, had been tough. But for me, it was like, hey, this is a clean slate,
Sure.
brother. This is a clean slate. This is a brand new opportunity. And there are going to be distinct challenges here that I did not face in San Antonio,
Sure.
which I really liked. I liked the thought process of being the underdog. There
Sure.
were so many times in those Spurs games, you were certainly not the underdog,
Yeah.
right? I liked being the underdog, and I still like it. I like coming in there and, like the final game of this past season at home against Denver. Were we the underdog coming to that game? Absolutely.
Yeah.
From the professionals' perspective, we were certainly the underdog. But for me, it was like, hey, this is not about Denver's record. It's not about our record. It's about one game and giving these guys the best opportunity, the best atmosphere possible so that we can end this final home game on the best, feeling possible. And for me, that was from day one. That's always been my idea is that here, like I said, is a clean slate, brand new challenge, so distinctly different that it's so new and so fresh. And yet now the idea is we go from where we've been the last two seasons, and now we want to start that upward growth.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to grow along with that and continue to develop and continue to be new and fresh. So each day is new when it comes to this for me because there are going to be unique challenges that are going to come along as we move forward into this season, of course.
Well, it's a chess match, I'm sure, because as you just said, the season this is a big expectation season with who they drafted and the pieces they picked, and especially the money they paid for some of these players. And so the expectations are high. So that also makes you have to get better during the season and
Right.
try to do one up. And it's sort of like you're getting to a point where you realize how many more tricks can I pull out of the old black hat? But in excitement, I'm sure for yourself.
It
Speaking of
is.
that, after a few years of Steven Silas and then he leaves, or however you want to define it, they bring in Odoko, who had spent some time away from the Celtics after his scenario. And I realized early on from his coaching, and even beforehand, everyone was thinking he was one of the favorites, or Nick Nurse and so forth. The culture changed pretty quickly within the organization and the team with Odoko, and then the staff eventually he got, who had been with the Celtics, and Thiago Splitter came in, and a few others. For you experiencing that from your perspective, what was that like seeing him form that coaching staff, him of that nature, getting the big job, and then what was the domino effect afterwards?
So for me, and I think people out there can understand what I'm about to say, but I'm so familiar with the type of culture that he's bringing to Houston. I witnessed that type of culture in San Antonio, and although they're not going to be exactly the same, they
Sure.
never are, right? There are similarities in the culture that he will bring here, the Houston Rockets, that I'm familiar with from my time in San Antonio. I watched him as an assistant there.
Yeah.
I watched him develop and showcase his ability to reach young players um, there was no surprise for me when he left the Spurs and had his first assistant opportunity outside of San Antonio. And it was no surprise to me when he got the job with the Boston Celtics because here's a guy who knows how to take and build a culture
Sure.
because he witnessed how that culture in San Antonio
Yeah.
could be adapted other places. And everybody, every team, and every city is unique. So the wisdom of Ime Udoka is the ability to come in here to Houston and adapt that culture to this organization and get it to fit and gel together in a way that's going to make them successful.
Up until this season, of course, any team has the doubters. The Rockets had a whole lot of naysayers, and they're slowly building with Smith, the junior, and Green and KPJ, and a few other players as well to then get to this point before the draft, this past draft, where they drafted Thompson and they stole Whitmore from everybody's grasp at pick
What a
20.
grab. What a grab.
As they've said, before the draft, though, how nervous were you about the team selection? Because there's always a prediction of, oh, they projected to pick this person and that person, and ends up maybe being a Kwame Brown scenario where it doesn't work out for the team or the player never sees the court. Were you nervous at all, or did you have a feeling that they hit a diamond in the rough with their selections? And then how did that change after the draft?
Okay, so I was more nervous going into the lottery. I'm just going to be more,
Yeah.
as transparent with you as possible. I was more nervous going into the lottery because everybody and their brother wanted who?
Yes.
Wemby, right?
Wembanyama.
Everybody wanted Wemby. There was a statement, "Pray for Victor," that we, heard through last season. I was more nervous there. The moment that night ended and realized where we were picking from, I felt like a lot of the decisions were going to be made for us, and
Yeah.
that who we were going to end up with was within a certain realm, right? There was
Yeah.
not a big guess. It was kind of a smaller selection. And really, my thought was, is it possible that Amen Thompson is available for us? And if he is, then the guy has shown the athleticism and the intensity and the desire to develop that those things that may be deficiencies in his game will not remain deficiencies
Sure.
because of his desire to continue to work and develop. Um, so I was a little more calm on draft night, and maybe it's the fact that I just had surgery the day before.
Yeah.
I just had major surgery the day before, but so maybe that had something to do with it. But I was very calm that night. I was, felt very calm about the situation and hopeful that once I heard them say Amen Thompson, and then of course the Cam Whitmore steal kind of was the icing on the cake for me there.
Yeah. Now, with the Rockets in the last many years, and of course you've been a fan since Robert Horry played for them in the early '90s and won those titles with them. For years, or I shouldn't say years, but more recently, the last 15 years or so, they've had members of the team backbones, Luis Scola, Shane Battier, guys like that, big guys, who, although they might not produce large statistical performance in the game, efficiently speaking, defensively, they're great players for the program. And more recently, they had guys like PJ Tucker, Daniel House, who were mainstays on the team during the dark years, but provide a lot on the defensive end. With a guy like KPJ, who's entering his another year and potentially a big contract year for this program, he's stepping further down the depth chart with Amen Thompson and Fred VanVleet in a scenario where everyone's looking for the chasing the bag to be paying tens of millions of dollars in this league. How important is it to keep someone like Kevin Porter Jr. on this team for the foreseeable future to ensure sustained success, do you think?
I think it's increasingly important in this league to keep a guy like KPJ, and especially when you see the development of this guy over the previous two seasons under
Yeah.
the situation that wasn't quite as favorable for growth and development as maybe it would have been in other places. But now that Ime Udoka is here, KPJ is really the master of his own destiny, and it's really up to him if he's willing to accept the role, whatever it may be that he's going to receive under Ime Udoka. He will thrive under that role if he willingly accepts it and puts in the effort that we believe he's capable of. And I would hope that if he shows that kind of ability this year, that he is certainly somebody who's earned an opportunity to continue to be part of this team. That's what you want. You want a guy
Yeah.
that says, "Hey, I want to earn my keep. I want to find a way to show this organization why I'm as valuable to them as anybody else.
Sure.
1 to 12, 1 to 15. I want to show this organization why I'm a guy you ought to keep around." Those are the guys that that not just 1 year, but over the years show
Yeah.
that development and that consistency that you want to see, so that they, when that contract year comes around, it's not just a flash in the pan,
Sure.
but somebody who's really put in the effort to show that growth. And I think this year could be that for KPJ.
Well, and it brings me to my next question, and I sort of mentioned it as I stuttered over my words and muttered over them that we're the time and place, not just in the NBA, but particularly as well in the NFL, where players are getting paid an extreme amount of money. I just saw that Joe Burrow signed a contract that he's going to be paying 55 million a year over the next 5 years for a total of like
You think he'll let us?
270, whatever it was. And it's like,
He'll let us borrow any of that money?
I, I'd have to move to Cincinnati. I guess I may have a connection. I can let you know.
All right, let
But
me
it's
know.
a scenario where it's like he's talented. Don't get me wrong, but is he worth it? In the NBA, the Rockets, and much to the fans' maybe demise at first, signed Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks to combine near $210 million. And I think fans were thinking, is that worth it for those guys long term? Fred VanVleet is an older player. Dylan Brooks is sort of erratic in terms of his demeanor on the court. For you, as a fan, but also someone who is around the organization, what does that do to a team from your perspective in terms of growth, what your team now wants to do, but also trying to build a character environment that you saw in San Antonio?
So it's all about investment,
Yeah,
and it really is. When you look at Fred VanVleet and you look at Dylan Brooks and the money that was invested in them this offseason, any investment that you make in life is either going to pay off or it's not, right?
yeah,
There's not many guarantees. But when I look at Fred VanVleet and what he brings to the table and his leadership ability and the fact that he is so motivated now outside of Toronto to come in here and create this new identity for
sure,
himself and this entire organization, man, that's worth every dime that's been invested in him. If it comes to fruition, it's going to pay off dividends not only for him, not only for the organization as a whole, but each one of these other guys that are on this roster because he is so crucial to their ability to grow.
sure,
And so that's only going to pay off dividends for more guys. So the investment that has been made in somebody like him, you really and truly hope that it pans out, that he stays
yeah,
healthy and that he continues his growth because if he does, everybody will benefit. And then look, Dylan Brooks, I don't care what anybody out there says about Dylan Brooks. Uh, I'm going to be excited to see him bring his mentality and
sure,
his drive to Houston. I'm excited to see that. I think back to the San Antonio Spurs, and I was, kind of thinking about comparisons. I don't like to do that very often with players because I'm mostly wrong. But I remember a player for the San Antonio Spurs before my time in San Antonio by the name of Bruce Bowen. Does that name ring a bell
yeah,
to you?
yeah,
And he was the kind of guy who defensively would drive people crazy.
yeah,
He had this deal back in those days where he would put his hand in the face of shooters. I mean, right in their face to the point it would aggravate. Kobe Bryant, he hated it. He hated that. And I think about Dylan Brooks, and I think the same mentality. A guy who wants to get in the face of others and show that he has the intensity and the desire to be better than them and to better his team. And from a defensive standpoint, you better believe that's going to come in handy for this
yeah,
Houston Rockets team because it's going to be contagious. It's
sure,
contagious when somebody like that. And I'm going to tell you this: I think Memphis is going to miss Dylan Brooks.
sure.
I think his mentality, his intensity was contagious there, and I think he'll do the same thing for the Houston Rockets. And you can't help, from my perspective anyway, be excited about that.
Well, it's a bullet train. There's no way moving out, so might as well let it hit you. And that, speaking of his intensity, and I saw the clip the other day or the photo on Twitter of the FIBA matchup between why am I
With him and
forgetting his
Luca,
name? Luca and Dylan. Dylan's right in his face like Kobe Bryant, not backing down at all. And it was sort of a, okay, big fella, we know what you're capable of. Speaking of the intensity that Dylan will bring, as well as the championship mentality that Fred will bring, where do you see this team going this year? Obviously, it's too far in advance to ever think or predict where they end up at the end. But how far of a leap will they take, do you think, at this season with who they picked up and who will be returning back?
well, if they don't make a significant leap, and I'm not talking about making the playoffs this year, or again, I'm not trying to make a prediction in terms of the overall record, but if the product on court doesn't take a significant leap in the positive direction, then people are going to say, "Hey, what's all this we invested for?" Right?
Yeah,
Um, but I have no doubt that what people see this year is going to be significantly improved, especially defensively. You think Ime Udoka is going to be satisfied with some of the defense that in the last couple of years the Rockets teams have had at periodic times? No, he's not gonna. He's
No.
not gonna be satisfied for that,
Yeah.
and his mentality is going to be the demand that they step up and on that side of the basketball, and they've shown the ability offensively to do things, special things. So you combine that with defensively, and I think about, we talked about Dylan Brooks. Maybe Ime Udoka is just the right person for Dylan
Yeah.
Brooks to bring out the very best in Dylan Brooks,
Sure.
and to bring out the very best in Jalen Green, and to bring out the very best in KPJ, and you go down that roster, and I think about um, a lot of people have a lot of care and a lot of trust right now in the big man. And I'm hoping to see uh, Alperen Şengün come out
Yeah.
this year under Ime Udoka and show us something that we didn't expect. And we already
Sure.
expect big things, but all those things combined, I think you're going to see a significant improvement in this team versus the last two seasons. I don't know where we end up. Would I take a play in? Yeah, absolutely. I'd
Yeah.
take a play in. If you guaranteed me a play in, I'd take it because that just giving them that taste of the playoffs, even if it's
Sure.
just that one game, just that taste of the playoffs and that atmosphere, I think can help a team dramatically. And you look like at the last few years of teams who have had that taste and what they've done after that. Some of those guys have taken advantage of that and grown considerably after that. So it's not so much about this year for me. It's a long term kind of goal.
Sure.
Like this year is great and they're going to have some significant growth, but there's kind of a more visionary plan as to what this team's going to do 2 and 3 years down the road.
I know you're a guy who's very grateful and thankful for the opportunity to do what you do professionally, but also to get back into the saddle and do it again after you thought you might not be able to.
Yeah.
Looking at the end of the road, whenever that may be, when you put the mic down, you make your final game time call. What do you want to leave behind professionally, but also personally, for Jonathan Sanford?
I want there to be another young kid out there who 10, 15 years from now comes and sits down in that chair, wherever it may be in this country for an NBA team and goes, yeah, I was that kid that grew up wherever, and I heard this redheaded guy that man, it captured my attention and my imagination and made me think, hey, I want to do that one day. When I'm said and done, and maybe I'm 6 feet under, that's my goal is that there's another generation of a PA announcer somewhere that I have, no pun intended, spurred
Sure.
on to want to be a part of this brotherhood, because it is the most, for me personally,
Yeah.
the most special thing you could do, because you get to interact with 18,000 people intimately, real time,
Yeah.
in a way that if you're a color guy, great. If you're a play-by-play guy, great. If you're TV, radio, great. But nobody has that intimacy with the fans on a game night like myself. Got the best seat in the house.
Sure.
Um, as the game rises and falls with the intensity, you're right there with that crowd interacting, and your calls become a part of their memories. And it was that way for me, and growing up, and now I'm praying that there are those out there that it's going to be that way for them. And when a kid comes up to me in San Antonio a few years back and says, "Hey, um, let you hear me do your calls." That's kind of cool. When a kid
Yeah.
comes up and says, "Hey, you remember this call? What you do? The Spurs ball? Listen to me. Let me do it." And then he does it, and you're like, "Hey, good job, man." Those are the kind of things for me that make it so rewarding. And here in Houston so far, it's been incredible. It's been a very short time, only 2 seasons, and
Sure.
already there are kids and even adults that'll say, "Man, I like it when you do this,"
Yeah.
or "My little 2-year-old son keeps mimicking you every game," and those are the kind of things that, once I'm done, once I've put down the mic for the final time, those are the things that will continue to live on long after I'm finished.
Well, I'm sure also for yourself to have been in a world where your signature on a basketball is right next to Tim Duncan one time is another powerful thing where you're saying, How the hell did that happen? But a moment that
Yeah.
showcases your talent and the ability that you do at such a high degree. And I can't thank you enough for doing this. But before we end, I want to end on a little game John called it the one word challenge. So what entails with this is I'll
Okay.
throw out a few names of people, place, or things that have some connection to you, and you have to do your best to say a word or two or sentence whenever it comes to mind for you. So if you're ready, I'll go.
Yeah, let's try this.
First one, Jasper, Alabama.
Home.
Houston, Texas.
Thank you for adopting me
Hard work.
every day.
Success.
For me, it's preparation, meeting
Uh,
opportunity.
Mike Plummer.
Without him, I'm not sitting here.
Simpson Pepper.
A voice still rings in my head every day.
And last but certainly never least in this cosmic universe we all called Earth, Jonathan Sanford.
Blessed.
Well, I hope you are. You certainly have the opportunity to be considered one of the greats in the profession today. Jonathan, I want to say thank you so much for doing this. This is a great treat to talk to somebody who's got, as you said, and exhibited a front row seat to one of the premier teams going right now is always a fun thing. So thank you.
I appreciate it. I thank you so much for this opportunity.
Good sir, where can we find you online, social media, and anything of that nature?
All right. On Twitter at the J Sanford, and on Instagram the same at the J Sanford. But also want to tell folks about their on Instagram this year at Rockets Entertainment. At Rockets Entertainment. That is myself, our in arena host Kiati, our in arena DJ Palmo, and many others who help make the game day experience what it is inside Toyota Center. So if you want to follow us, whether personally myself, DJ Sanford on Twitter or Instagram, or check out all of Rockets Entertainment there on Instagram, do that so you can keep up with us this season. We're going to have giveaways. We're going to have good stuff for you all season long. So check us out there on Instagram as well.
Well, down the line, when my guest this week gets inducted into the either Houston or Texas Broadcasters Hall of Fame, you're gonna say, "Oh my gosh, I should have subscribed." So subscribe, comment, share, all that fun jazz. As I said at the beginning, it's gonna help the algorithm. Then, come on, guys, who doubts that this show is gonna take off humongously? Like it already is. Follow on Instagram, Nolan Car Night Show. I always mess that up with the Twitter, which is Nolan Car Night. And in the words of Johnny Carson, the dean of talk shows, certainly like this one, I bid you all a heartfelt good night. Till next time.